Good evening. Welcome to the September 17th, 2024 meeting of the Portsmouth, New Hampshire Zoning Board of Adjustment. The meeting is now called to order. I should have done that before, but I'm allowed. The first order of business is I'm going to remind everybody about the timing. If you are here with a request of the zoning board, you have 15 minutes. If you're going to need more than that, we appreciate a heads up before, and we can decide if we are going to give you that time. If you're speaking to, for, or against, you have 5 minutes. Okay? All right, the first item of business is approval of the minutes of the August 20th, 2024 meeting. Minutes. Does anybody have? Yes.
I've got one minor edit suggestion.
We have to move to.
Do you want to move first, or do you want the edits first?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
I have a suggested edit. Do you want the edits first, or do you want the motion first?
Edits first, please.
On page 7, the top paragraph, about just over halfway down, there's a sentence that starts, "He noted that the earlier proposal." Instead of the, it should be an earlier proposal.
Okay.
That's the only
That's
suggestion.
the only one?
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Ram, yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also have a correction on page 8 of the minutes. About 3/4 of the way down, there is a sentence that starts with, "He said he was irritated that the applicant wasn't better prepared by providing the information to the board." Thought it out, and towards the end it says, "Didn't think it was fair to deny the special exception on the assumption the traffic is such magnitude that it triggers a special exception." The special exception was triggered by the applicant's request. So instead of the words triggers it really should have read, "could not meet the criteria for the special exception." Thank you.
Any other? Okay. Do we now have a motion to accept these agenda items?
Madam Chair, I would move that we accept the minutes for the August 20th, 2024 meeting as amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Okay, both amendments are up for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The changes are accepted. The amendments are accepted. The first item of business is old business A. The request of Jared, and forgive me, Macher, for property located at 84 Thaxter Road, whereas relief is needed to construct an attached garage and a 1.5-story addition and to demolish an existing detached garage, which requires the following. 1, a variance from section 10.5212A, allowed 22% building coverage, 20 is allowed. B, allow a 15.5-foot front setback where 30 feet is required. And 2, a variance from section 10.321 to allow a non-conforming building or structure to be extended, reconstructed, or enlarged without conforming to the requirements of the ordinance. Said property is located on Assessor Map 166, Lot 34, and lies within the Single Residence B SRB district. Hello.
Hello, Madam Chair, members of the board. For the record, Attorney Derek Durbin. I'm here on behalf of the applicants who are also the owners of the property at 84 Thaxter Road. The property we're discussing is a 7,500 square foot parcel of land that has a single family home on it that's 1.5 stories, believed to be constructed in the 1930s based on the assessing records. The applicants reside there full time. The property is described in the current deed as the whole of lot number 58 and the northwesterly half of lot number 57 on the West Park subdivision plan of 1924. I did provide a copy of that plan with the written narrative accompanying the application, and if you look at that plan, you'll see that the all the lots as they were originally laid out, or I should say the vast majority of them, were in a 50 by 100 foot configuration. Many of the properties in the neighborhood remain in that configuration, while others have been merged with a half a lot or a whole lot, such as the Mashers property. One common characteristic that these properties do share along Thaxter Road is that none of them meet the 15,000 square foot lot area requirement for the SRB zoning district. Most of the properties have about a third to a half, or similar to the Mashers property. The Mashers are expecting a baby pretty much any day now, right? Are proposing a 1.5-story addition to the left side of their house when facing it from Thaxter Road that would accommodate a single-car garage with living space above. The addition is designed to match the roof line and design of the existing home. They would also like to add a small porch area onto the front of the home, kind of inset from the existing stairs if you look at the plans. The two additions together would put the building coverage over by 2%. The front porch would also, the new front porch area would also encroach into the front yard setback, although it wouldn't encroach any farther than the existing stairs, which are 15.5 feet from the front boundary. For reference, the new porch area would be at 17.5 feet from the front boundary. There is a non-conforming garage that is located to the rear of the home, encroaches into the right and rear yard setbacks. The applicants are proposing to demolish that garage, bring the property into compliance with those two setbacks. Unless there are any questions at this stage, I'd just move into addressing the variance criteria. Okay. Granting the variances will not be contrary to the public interest and will observe the spirit of the ordinance. Here, the question is, would it alter the essential character of the neighborhood, or in the alternative, threaten public health, safety, welfare? There are numerous examples of other similarly designed additions along Thaxter Road. The neighborhood itself is characterized by substandard lots, as I had mentioned, that exceed that 20% building coverage limitation. We did a calculation based on the city's assessing records, which I include as Exhibit C to the narrative, which shows you the various building coverages on surrounding properties between, on Thaxter Road between Sewell and Islington Street, and the number comes out on average to 22%. There's only, I think, 2 properties that do comply with the building coverage requirement, but are significantly larger, so they are truly the outliers in this particular neighborhood. I wanted to just correct a misstatement in my narrative where I said that all the other properties were larger that complied. That was a mistake on my part, so I just wanted to correct that with my statement before the board tonight. As this board knows, the primary purpose of the building coverage limitation is to prevent the overcrowding of structures on land. In this case, that 2% deviation that's proposed is the equivalent to 150 square feet, excuse me. It's a pretty small encroachment over the existing building coverage limitation. The home is quite small, particularly when you consider a modern family, and also when you add somebody that works from home into the equation. So, it is, I believe, a reasonable request. Applicants have made a conscious effort to minimize the footprint and size of the addition while balancing the need for the garage storage space and additional living space above. While the property does currently comply with that building coverage limitation, the applicants, as I pointed out, will be offsetting the new proposed nonconformity with bringing the rear and right yard setbacks into compliance. So for these reasons, granting the variances will have no negative impact upon the light, air, and space of the abutters and should not alter the essential character of the neighborhood or threaten public health, safety, or welfare. Turning to the substantial justice criteria, substantial justice will be done by granting the variances. Denying the variances would constitute a loss to the applicants that is not outweighed in this instance by any gain to the public. Can't think of any real conceivable gain that would be realized by the public if the variance were denied. The additions are reasonable and are in keeping with other homes in the neighborhood and other additions to homes that have been constructed in recent years. The increase in building coverage will not overcrowd the land in any way. The demolition of the detached non-conforming garage should actually improve the appearance of the property along with the improvements that are proposed to the home. So for these reasons, the balancing test, I believe, weighs in favor of the applicant. The value surrounding properties will not be diminished by granting the variances. As I stated, this design is in keeping with other homes in the neighborhood. The additions are, I would say, will integrate the two additions. The front and the left side additions will integrate naturally with the existing architecture of the home. And again, the removal of the detached garage will only improve the value of surrounding properties. I should point out before I go any farther that you should have received a letter from Jim Nukas and his wife, who are the abutters to the right in support of the application. The Mashers also made a conscious effort to go around their neighborhood and speak to all their neighbors about what was proposed, and all of them indicated their support. So I would just point that out for the record. Finally, literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. The property does have special conditions that distinguish it from surrounding properties in the neighborhood. It is one of the only properties, as I pointed out, that exceeds the, that is under the 20% building coverage limitation. Of the others, only 2 are larger lots. All but 2 are larger lots. In the case of Bellinger v. Nashua, the Supreme Court determined that municipalities have an obligation to have their zoning ordinances reflect the current character of neighborhoods, and when it's not reflective, the zoning board must consider the prevailing character and its nonconformities as part of its analysis. In this case, the zoning isn't reflective of the character of the neighborhood, as evidenced by the size of the lots and the fact that the vast majority of homes exceed the 20% building coverage limitation. The applicants really can't reasonably expand upon the home with any type of functional addition without exceeding that 20% threshold. The only way, and we looked at different ways to try to reduce the size of the addition down beyond what it exists now on the plans, and really the only way to make it comply would be to reduce it by approximately 6 feet in width, which would render the garage and really the living space above it non-functional. The applicant's property was created and developed long before the enactment of SRB zoning and that 15,000-foot lot area requirement. So for these reasons, there is no fair and substantial relationship between the general purpose of the ordinance provision and their application of the property. Last, the proposed use is reasonable. It'll continue as a single-family use, and that is a use obviously permitted by right in the SRB zoning district. So with that, I'll conclude my presentation. Happy to answer any questions you have. I have J.P. Masher here as well, with his father Mark, who worked on the design plans. So.
Are there questions for Attorney Durbin? Yes, Mr. Ram.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you talk a lot about the need for the 2% over the coverage. However, there's not a lot of discussion in your write-up regarding the front setback. I know you mentioned that the porch is in the front setback, but if you look at page 36 of our package, a substantial portion of the garage and the new extension to the hall area also falls within the front setback, which is 30 feet. It extends based off, well, there's no direct dimension on page 36, but on the previous one, it's about 7.5 feet, at least for the hall, probably 6.5 feet-ish for the garage. I'm just wondering, and that goes up to like a second floor. So one question is do you, was there any consideration given to trying to look at the averaging of the neighboring properties? And I would direct you to
Yes.
page 48, I'm sorry, of our package. Now, where you have the map geo excerpt, I'm sorry, page 34.
I can reference it.
It would appear like you're not out of compliance, but I didn't know if you've tried to average that to see
We did. I just hate to rely on that provision because more often than not, we're relying on non-surveyed data, and trying to scale it off. It's very close. If it's not, if you were to do that averaging, the front setback would be basically probably in line with where the home is in the addition. But it was hard to determine from the map geo. I can actually, if just one moment, and I can get the answer to, I believe, exactly what the distance was. But
It's not essential. I was just curious if you had looked at that. It would seem to be supportive of your.
It is.
Your argument. And I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to add in terms of that particular relief, because again, I found your explanation talked a lot
Sure.
to the coverage, much less to that particular concern.
To the front setback?
Yeah.
Yeah, just that it would not, that it is in line with other homes along the street. It's not, we're really not encroaching into, for example, the pedestrian right-of-way in any meaningful way. Again, if you were to use that averaging, yes, we would probably be very close to compliant, if not compliant, but again, the major consideration is it going to affect light, air, and space for abutters and the public, or impact their public safety in this instance. I would submit that it will not, and the addition was designed to stay, I should say, the left side addition was designed to stay in line with the existing home, whereas the front porch addition was just sort of a natural way to tie in to where the existing stairs are. However, it's likely those stairs will be replaced, hence the request for the 15.5 foot of relief related to that front addition. So.
Okay. Thank you. And then one other, open space is not one of the things we're taking a look at, but I was just a little confused.
Yep.
Again, on page 36, there is a calculation of current open space at 83%, proposed open space at 78%. That does not match our staff report, which has those two numbers at 73% and 72% respectively. So I was just curious. I just want to make sure that we aren't missing something there.
Yeah. Yeah, let me just ask a question if I could.
I believe the open, can I answer?
He's got to come forward.
No problem. Permission to approach the bench?
Yes, please.
When I first calculated the open space, I wasn't sure if the driveway was included in that or not. So I looked at it both, including it with and without the driveway. So when so I don't know which number you have, but if you, but that could have been I didn't include the driveway in the open space. Then I went back. I thought I submitted the update to that, in which once I included the driveway, because we're deleting one driveway, right, the existing driveway, we're getting rid of that. So that, you're getting your answer.
73 or 83?
73%, I believe,
Okay.
is the correct number.
Is that-
Identify himself.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Pardon?
Can you give us your name?
Oh, Mark
And
Masher, I'm
details.
sorry. Mark, I'm JP's father, even though he might not admit it.
Is it true? All right,
That's all I have, Madam Chair. Thank you.
okay.
Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't something that we were missing. Normally, things are congruent with the staff report, so.
I think you did, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions? Okay, then the public hearing is closed. No, it's-
Thank you.
No, it's not. I'm going to there was a question?
No, are you going to open the public
No, I'm
hearing?
sorry, I'm going to open it again. I don't know what it is tonight. Is there anyone to speak in favor of this petition? Anyone to speak in opposition? Anyone to speak to, for, or against?
Hit it.
Now the public hearing's closed. And I just will remind you of the letter that we received in favor of the petition. So, what would you like to do? Yes,
I'll make a motion to approve the application as presented.
is there a second? Okay.
I'll
thank
second
you.
that.
Oh, I'm sorry, we have one for Mr. Mann. So,
Okay.
go ahead.
So taking the first two criteria together, the variance is not contrary to the public interest and the spirit of the ordinance is observed. In this case, this proposed addition and front porch is entirely within the character of the neighborhood and does not create any issues with public safety. The next one is substantial justice is done. And here we're weighing that the benefit to the applicant should not be outweighed by the harm to the general public. And there's nothing to suggest that this addition would harm the general public, and this would benefit the property owner to make better use of their property. The next one is the values of surrounding properties are not diminished. And there's no reason to suggest that improving this property would diminish any surrounding property values, and it's still just a single-family residence use, and it's going to be updated. And then finally, the last criteria is literal enforcement of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship. Because of the special conditions of the property that distinguish it from other properties in the area, there is no fair and substantial relationship between the general purposes of the ordinance provision and the specific application of the provision to this property. And the proposed use is a reasonable one. Again, this is a reasonable use because it's still just a single-family home. And the hardship here is that this is an undersized lot that was created, and the home was created before the modern zoning standards. And because of that situation, the home itself is both located closer to the street than the current required setback, and this addition brings it no closer to the street. And finally, the undersized lot, it's a really minor relief being asked for here, and again, this stems from this lot being so small, so it's a reasonable hardship.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mann, do you have anything to add?
Mr. Manson covered it all. It's typical for these neighborhoods where the zoning is greater than what the actual reality on the ground is. In this case, the lot size is half of what SRB is. And that being said, the building coverage, what they're asking for is another 150 square feet. That is so small. And from looking at the design, this would fit in, and once it's built, 2 years from now, nobody would ever know it's a new build. So I will support the motion.
Okay, thank you. Is there any discussion before we vote? Okay, so a yes vote approves the plan. Okay. Mr. Neese?
Yes?
Mr. Mannel?
Yes.
Ms. Margison?
Yes.
Mr. Rayam?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. You are approved. Okay. Our next item of business is old business again, item B. It is the request of Zhang Kevin Shaitan Revocable Trust, and again, I am doing my best, for property located at 377 Maplewood Avenue, whereas relief is needed to demolish the existing accessory building and construct a new detached accessory dwelling unit, which requires the following. 1. Variance from section 10.521(a), allow a building coverage of 37.5%, where 25% is allowed. B, allow an open space of 24.5%, where 30 is required. C, allow setback of 4.5 feet where 10 is required. C, allow a secondary front yard setback of 6 feet where 10 is required. D, allow a left yard setback of 4.5 feet where 10 is required. E, allow a rear yard setback of 3 feet where 20 is required. And 2, variance from section 10.321 to allow a nonconforming building or structure to be extended, reconstructed, or enlarged without conforming to the requirements of the ordinance. Said property is located on Assessor Map 141, Lot 22, and lies within the general residence, GRA, and historic districts. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the
Madam
board.
Chair.
Again, for the record.
Chair.
Yes, okay,
Fisher?
go ahead. Did you want to say,
Okay.
I was going to say that in our planning department report, the matter of Fisher v. Dover was brought
yeah.
up, and I wanted to know what you wanted to do about that, if you thought this was something we should put in place, or,
I think we should proactively address it.
yes. What are your thoughts?
Meaning we're going to ask the applicant to make a presentation on Fisher v. Dover?
To make his case, yeah.
I thought we'd decide if we think he should go ahead with the application, or whether we think it is too much. Is that not what we usually do?
I could be thoroughly confused.
Yes.
It can go either way.
can go either
And you
way.
can discuss as a board, and if there are questions, Attorney Durbin can come up and address just the Fisher versus Dover.
We can decide if we think it falls into that category or not at all. Yes.
So it's my opinion it doesn't fall into Fisher v. Dover. The applicant has made an attempt, which we will decide later whether it's successful or not, to address concerns raised in an earlier ZBA meeting. I forget which case it is, but there's some case that says that kind of takes it out of the realm of Fisher v. Dover if they're trying to adopt it. They also made a number of changes to the proposal as well, which suggests to me that Fisher v. Dover does not apply in this case.
I'm going to agree that I don't think it falls into that realm either. We were given the minutes from that meeting, and so much of that seems to be about parking, whereas many of the other parts of the project seemed acceptable, but different from what has come before us today. So I would be very willing to go ahead and hear this as a new petition, depending what the board decides. Mr. Ram.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I was on the board at the time that the original application came before us. I think parking was definitely one of the significant concerns, and it was driven in part by the size of what had been proposed by the applicant for the, what they were calling the carriage house building, which was a sizable two-bedroom structure that had a lot of amenities to it, and really with that size, there was really no room for parking. The applicant had shown 3 stacked vehicles as being the parking solution for that. I think in this particular case, the applicant has reduced the overall size of it. I guess it would be up to this board to decide if that's significant improvement enough to get it approved. However, I do think it's a significant enough change in what they are proposing for the parking arrangement and the size of the back structure that Fisher v. Dover would not apply, and that we would hear it separately from that on its own merits.
I agree.
Okay, would someone like to make a motion about whether or not we should consider, or do we not?
Yeah, if we're not invoking Fisher v.
Then we don't
Dover, I don't
need it.
think we
can
have to
just
do
vote.
anything.
Thank you.
I think we
Okay.
could just say we believe that Fisher v. Dover does not
Does
apply
not
to this
apply, and
application.
therefore you were welcomed back to
Make your
speak
case.
to us. Come forward.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Again, for the record, Derek Durbin. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, who's also the owner of the property. And I'm just on that Fisher v. Dover point, that building that was previously proposed had a footprint that was just over 1,600 square feet. This one's at 1,104 right now. Before I get too far, I believe Brendan McNamara, who worked on the design plans, is zooming in from outer space,
Okay.
from Australia. So he should be on, can answer any of the architectural related questions. I also have Jason Cook here from TF Moran. TF Moran did the survey, existing and proposed conditions plans for the property. And if you have any questions about coverages or dimensions of that nature, he's here to answer those. Kevin's also here to answer any questions you might have for him. The property at 377 Maplewood Avenue is a just over a 5,000 square foot lot, does contain a 1.5 story single-family home that Kevin lives in. There's as we're talking about tonight, a large outbuilding behind that, believed to have been constructed in the early 1900s. Tried to look into the history of it. It's unclear. It's believed, rumor has it, that it was used as a sail-making shop at some point and then served various other uses in the course of the 20th century. Since then, the building's fallen into significant disrepair, as you can see with the photographs that were submitted with the application. It's fallen into enough disrepair that it would be infeasible to rehabilitate it. It's missing portions of the exterior walls, and the floor is in pretty rough shape. The property itself is severely constrained, as you can see from the plans. In the existing condition, the property is non-conforming with respect to building coverage, open space, and all of the setbacks. In addition to these nonconformities, the property, as discussed quite a bit at the 2020 zoning board hearing, which I provided you a copy of minutes of, doesn't allow for proper vehicular ingress and egress from the property in conjunction with the parking and how the buildings are oriented on the lot. Right now, vehicles are in most instances forced to back into the street and into the public right-of-way, which is obviously not ideal from a planning perspective or public safety perspective. Kevin would like to demolish the outbuilding and replace it with a carriage house style building with a smaller footprint. The building would serve as a one-bedroom accessory dwelling unit for his mother, who currently stays with him and cares for his kids while he operates his restaurant downtown Portsmouth, which many of you may be familiar with, the Pink Bamboo. This would obviously allow her to have her own independent living space in the property, which is the very reason the ADU statute was created. Design plans for the building were presented to the HDC at a work session on June 12th, and there was overwhelming support expressed for the current design. There weren't any negative comments. Most of the comments centered around the single-family home and what was going to be done with it. If the applicant's successful tonight, he will need to go to the planning board for a conditional use permit application, as you likely know, for the accessory dwelling unit use of that back building. Turning to the variance criteria, granting the variances will not be contrary to the public interest, would observe the spirit of the ordinance. The proposed design would bring the property into much greater conformance with the dimensional requirements of the ordinance. It would allow for proper vehicular ingress and egress from the property, which may actually be the biggest benefit behind what is proposed, at least from a public safety standpoint. The light, air, and space of abutting properties will be benefited to some degree by having a smaller building that achieves greater compliance with the setbacks, not compliance. So overall, the conditions and appearance of the property would be greatly improved with the demolition of that existing building and its replacement with a more modern, code-compliant building that falls in line with the design of other similar structures in the neighborhood, which there are some examples of. So for these reasons, granting the variances will not be contrary to the public interest, public health, safety, welfare, would not negatively alter the essential character of the neighborhood. Substantial justice would be done by granting the variances. The loss to the applicant in this instance is not outweighed by any perceivable gain to the public. That rear building really doesn't have any functional or aesthetic value at this point. It's really not even safe to use for storage, and is an eyesore to the neighbors, as I've already heard from a neighbor. If the variance relief is denied, that rear building would just continue to deteriorate, and the parking and vehicular ingress, egress would continue to be an issue, which represents a loss to the applicant and the public alike. The value of surrounding properties will not be diminished by granting the variances. Right now, I think I would submit to the board that the existing outbuilding is really only diminishing surrounding property values from what they would otherwise be with what is proposed. So for these reasons, I would submit to the board that, if anything, there will be an improvement surrounding property values. Finally, literal enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship. The property does have myriad special conditions that distinguish it from surrounding properties. For one, it's a corner lot with primary frontage on Maplewood Avenue and secondary frontage on Jackson Hill Street. And therefore, as the board knows, it's burdened by 15-foot front yard setbacks in this instance, as opposed to one 15-foot and one 10-foot side yard setback. It also, if you look at the photographs, or have been by the property, which you can hardly access at this point if you're driving around Portsmouth, it does have a very steep slope, sort of like a hill along the Jackson Hill boundary, which further constrains the property. It also makes it very difficult to get vehicles to properly maneuver out of the property, which is one of the issues presently. In addition, the property has only one property that really truly abuts it to the left in the rear. That's the property at 383 Maplewood Avenue. It appears, from what I can see from title history, that the properties were once part of a larger parcel that was subdivided, which then created the nonconformities that presently exist. If you look at 383 Maplewood Avenue, the only building on it is situated at the far left, or if you're looking at the plan, southwesterly portion of the property, a pretty good distance away from where this carriage house building is proposed. So it's really just surrounded by open space back there. So many of the considerations that might normally apply to a building that's encroaching in the setbacks don't necessarily apply here, but to the extent they do, if anything, will be improving them and increasing light, air, and space. So as a result of these special conditions, there is no fair and substantial relationship between the general purpose of the ordinance provisions, their application of the property. Last, the proposed use is reasonable and consistent with the objectives of GRA zoning, which is to provide areas for single-family, two-family, and multifamily dwellings with appropriate accessory uses at moderate to high densities. The use proposed is permitted within the GRA zoning district, would not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. If you're considering just the use itself, which is not necessarily what we're looking at tonight, but if you look at the ADU use, there are a number of examples of actually single-family freestanding dwellings in the neighborhood, which was what was proposed previously and denied by this board in 2020. So this is a lesser accessory use. And I guess and there's also a number of buildings also that contain a number of condominium or apartment units as well in the neighborhood. If you look at the plans, I'm sure one question will be, well, how could you possibly reduce the building footprint further? You could eliminate the garage. I mean, that's an obvious if you look at the plans. If you do that, you're just basically taking away some needed storage that for the applicant. They hardly have any storages that exist in the house. It also would just take away covered parking. Ultimately, area would be used for parking with the way that things are laid out on the property. So, but that would be, I suppose, one way you could get the building coverage down even further than it is now. But I would point out that the setback too that we're dealing with on that side of the property, that's really not, that garage encroachment is not affecting any of the abutting properties in any tangible way, and there is a slope to that side. So anyways, for these reasons, I would hope the board will approve the variances. I'm happy to answer any questions you have, and I know Brendan is, well, I hope he's zoomed in, answer any design questions, because I am not an architect, but or a designer.
Mr. McNamara does have his hand up. Would you like to allow him to speak?
Are there questions for him? Would you like to hear from Mr. McNamara?
I
He's come a long way. Well,
I have questions, but I don't know if he has a prepared statement.
do you know if he has a prepared statement?
Brendan?
He has his hand up on Zoom, so I'm wondering if he's just identifying himself or if he has something to say. Do you know?
Why don't we ask him?
We can
Can't
ask
ask
him.
him.
Yeah, just let's ask.
Okay.
Yeah, I assume that he wants to speak, but I know he was a little, concerned about the whole
What
Zoom
time
thing.
is it,
So.
Brett?
Yeah. That's our real question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, there we go. He's there.
Right. Hello, it's Brendan McNamara speaking. I am the residential designer on this project. I think Derek's done a nice job of laying it out. The design was specifically directed towards meeting the requirements of the ADU ordinance, and it seems like a natural fit in this circumstance. On my screen, it's currently showing the previous application, not the view of the current one.
Yeah, I had
The one that's before.
hadn't noticed that actually.
Yeah, that's
that was provided for context
Sorry about
purposes for the
that.
Fisher v. Dover piece of this. So
Yeah.
apologize if that created any confusion.
My mistake. Here it is.
Yeah.
Yep, that's it there. Yeah. So that's the current application is on view at the moment. I think it most likely speaks for itself. It is in terms of the general setup of it. It is a slab on grade, so its height is reduced as much as possible, but it's remaining within context of the needs and requirements of the Historic District Commission. It's still essentially trying to have the appearance of some sort of utility, carriage house style building, but we have specifically addressed the parking requirements, but most specifically to allow a turnaround so that vehicles on the property can leave the property nose out. So, if you have any questions, happy to
Would you
answer them.
excuse me 1 minute, Mr. McNamara? We were just at the point where we were going to see if we had any questions for Attorney Durbin. So I would ask you to stay on hold in case we have questions for you, and we may.
Certainly.
But I think I'm going to bring it back to us at this point. And I see Mr. Ray. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Page 61 of the application, our package, it's your page 6 of 7 of your discussion. In there, under little enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance will result in unnecessary hardship, you have, therefore, the property is uniquely burdened by two 15-foot front yard setbacks as opposed to one 15-foot front yard setback and two 10-foot side yard setbacks. And you doubled down on that in your discussion and referenced that again before us. But looking at the staff memo, it shows that there's a 10-foot, it calls it a 10-foot front, secondary front setback. And what is advertised for this is also references the 10 feet and not the 15 feet. So I was looking for clarification on that point between yourself and or the city staff.
Attorney Durbin, do you know if that's a public way, Jackson Hill Street?
That was looked into several years ago when we presented this. It was never expressly, I didn't find evidence, at least there wasn't evidence that I was aware of that it was necessarily accepted at a public meeting. I think it predates that time. It is maintained as a public street, so I think there's an implied acceptance there that exists. So it has always been treated, and we were advised in 2020 to treat it as a secondary front yard setback.
Right. So on page 63 of our packet, that's the original application from 2020, does show a 10-foot side yard setback, and your most recent application similarly shows a 10-foot side yard setback, looking at page 82 of our packet. It doesn't have a dimension on there, but it's the same dimensional line, and it's certainly less than the 15 feet for the front setback. So I'm just curious, we're kind of calling this you are making reference to it
Sure.
as a reason why this board should approve it, but the staff report doesn't seem to correspond to it, even though it does call it a secondary front yard, and it's as advertised.
Sure. Well, I mean, again, that would be a more stringent requirement that we cited too, assuming that it's the 15-foot. Maybe there is a disagreement at this point over whether it's a 10 or a 15. In any event, again, if you threw out that argument as a special condition, say it's 10 feet, you're still improving upon that. I believe we're improving upon that setback. Let me just go left yard setback.
Yes, it's going from 0 to 6.1.
Yeah. So I think, again, I think really the point is that there are these nonconformities that we can't get around that exist now. And if you were to try to put this into compliance with all the applicable setbacks, you're limited to really not much back there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And then on page 57 of the application, it's page 2 of 7 of your discussion, you state, and the drawings also concur with this, that the building footprint of the proposed ADU is 1,104 square feet. Now, the requirements for this, you still have to go before the planning board for a conditional use permit. They can give you relief, but I just want to make sure. Paragraph 10, 814.434 of our zoning ordinance says the building footprint of the building for a detached ADU shall be no greater than 750 square feet.
Yes.
I was just wondering if you could explain the discrepancy there.
Yeah, we need a modification along with the conditional use permit application. So we would, if we were successful tonight, we would need a modification related to the garage part of this. So I think that's ultimately, there's been quite a bit of discussion about that because we were trying to figure out ways like to still provide what's needed, but without having to request a modification. But that's ultimately,
And perhaps a question for the architect, Mr. McNamara, is there a firewall between those two structures? I would think that would be required by code.
Residential requirement only requires that it be a 1-hour rated wall, which is just a question of using 5/8 type X sheetrock on that wall, as per any residential house in a garage.
Because I know there is,
So it's not-
there is a provision in our ordinance that says that if you have a firewall separation, that could be a plus for you as well. So, okay, that's all I had.
Yeah, we haven't reviewed that in terms of that specific addressing that overall floor area issue. So.
Are there other questions? Yes, Mr. Neese.
Thank you. I'd like to follow up on that last question about the building footprint.
Yeah.
On page 3 of 7, page 58 of our package, you say that you're requesting a variance to allow a detached accessory dwelling unit in a new building that does not conform with the dimensional requirements of the ordinance. So it sounds to me like you're asking for a variance there as well on the building footprint size, but it's unclear to me. What exactly do you mean by that paragraph?
Yeah, so that paragraph existed, when I submitted the application, obviously it's carried through, but then the staff determined that there is no, that the proper mechanism for that is a modification with the conditional use permit application at the planning board. That was, issue was raised after submission, so it's a carry through, I believe, in the narrative. But there is no relief required for that, if I understand your question. It's just related to building coverage.
So that's what I'm talking about, building coverage is the building footprint as well.
Yes, but
So
I
you're
guess
not asking for a variance from the building footprint.
that's correct. That's what I was intending to say, yes.
So I'd also like to confirm, I think you said this in your presentation.
Sure.
You are tearing down the existing building and replacing it with this new building.
Yes, it really needs to be torn down, yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay.
I'll save my others for the
I
discussion.
appreciate the questions about the accessory dwelling unit. They were on my mind as well in terms of size. Yes.
Just as a follow-up to that question, I mean, on that, to allow a detached accessory dwelling unit in the new building that's not conform with the dimensional requirements of the ordinance, from staff's standpoint, is that your understanding as well, what Mr. Durbin said? Or is it related to the fact that he requires setback relief?
Can you, is it set under number 6 for summary of zoning relief?
Yeah.
That's what we're
Yeah.
talking about?
Yeah,
Page
I
58.
yes, I'm sorry, I don't want to cut anybody off. I included that originally out of an, as they say, an abundance of caution, because I looked at it and said, maybe we need a variance from this. It was, then after the submission, I believe it was Peter Stith pointed out, you don't, maybe it was Stephanie, I can't remember, but we were all in an email chain on it. Said you don't need that, so we're going to take that out.
Yes.
Yeah, I can just clarify and confirm this from experience. Is the ordinance does mention the building footprint size, so it is true that it's relative to the ordinance, but it's under the section for a conditional use permit modification that can be asked for at the planning board for the conditional use permit. So it's not a variance for the building footprint, even though it doesn't conform to the ordinance. Because
Thank you for having this experience.
yes.
So,
I've watched Jeff's experience, I
Yeah, you
think,
did.
online, yeah.
I'm going to let Ms. Margerson speak, and then
So,
I'll get back to you.
I just want to clarify, I realize that the building footprint is a modification to the CUP that the planning board does. However, if it were a smaller building, we wouldn't need as much relief from the setback requirements, correct?
That is a correct statement. As I had mentioned before, you could lop off the garage. I just don't, our argument is that it really doesn't make any sense in this instance to do it when that area is naturally going to be used for parking and could serve as covered parking and storage, which the applicant has very little of.
It's just a strange disconnect that we're trying to, Mr. Neese.
I guess we could, yeah.
if I might ask Mr. Mattson a question? I'm just a little confused on your comment on
Yeah.
conditional use permit. I'm not unfamiliar with why a section that says requirements for accessory dwelling units is only addressed by the planning board and is not an issue that the zoning board looks at?
Yes, so in the ordinance, there is a section specific to accessory dwelling units,
10.81.
814, yeah.
Right.
And in that section, it talks about the ADU building's footprint being 750 square foot
Right.
or less. So that's why it's stated here that it doesn't conform to that part of the ordinance. But it's not a variance because in that section 10.814 talking about ADUs, it says that when you go before the planning board for a conditional use permit, because that's who sees conditional use permits, not us, they have the ability to grant modification for the building footprint. They can't grant modification for going over 750 square feet of living area, but they can do, that would be a variance. But for the building footprint, it's just a modification as opposed to a variance.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I have another question for the applicant, though.
Wait, go ahead.
So I'm a little confused, just want to be a clarification. On page 57 of your package, you say the detached accessory dwelling unit will only have a bedroom and bathroom. However, clearly, the drawing shows that it's going to have a kitchen and family room attached as well.
That's correct, yes. I'm sorry, it's just typically when I will talk about a use, I'm talking about number of, or talking about a house, I would talk about number of bedrooms and bathrooms, but you are absolutely correct. It will have that space associated with the living space, so.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I have 2 bedrooms upstairs.
Madam
Are there
Chairman.
more questions? Yes, Mr. Mantle.
Derek,
Yep.
since we're talking about the building footprint of the ADU, what is the building footprint of the ADU? 1,050?
It's 1104. The building footprint is 1104 square feet.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Okay.
Are there further questions?
I should clarify, though, the ADU part is not, the ADU itself, apart from, if you were to consider that apart from the garage, is within the 750.
Okay.
Now you got me confused, okay?
Well,
The entire building that you're.
the entire
putting in
building is
back
1104.
Is an ADU, correct?
Yes, that, technically speaking, that is correct. I'm saying the living space is, as Jeff had pointed out, it's at, I think, 749 square feet. The garage brings it to 1104. That's what I mean.
That's
So-
not really
Yeah.
what we need to consider now, because
The building.
needs to get the
Yeah.
conditional use permit from the.
Okay, but just for the record, the building footprint is not the same as the floor area or the living area. It's measured on the outside. So the building
Correct.
footprint is actually over 750 square feet.
Correct.
ADU section, just to be clear on the record.
Yeah, that's
No,
correct.
sorry, can I just correct that? Sorry.
If you come
The,
up, okay, go ahead, sorry.
yeah,
I think that's Brendan,
The
I
building
think.
footprint that's associated with the ADU, which actually that operates, I think, on the gross living area, which is actually is the interior wall measurement. But the exterior wall measurement is just under 750 square feet.
It's, well, it's not up for us, but it's not.
Okay, okay. Thank you. Are there further questions? Yes,
I just have one for Architect McNamara. What time is it there?
yeah.
It is 10 o'clock Wednesday morning.
Okay, well, not so
Oh,
bad.
So
fine.
I don't have to worry about meetings going late.
You get a breakfast
in the
in
middle
the
of the morning. So it's quite luxurious for me. So,
Thank you. Thank you. I will
Well,
now
thank you very
open it
much.
to the public.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak in favor of this petition? Anyone in opposition? Anyone to speak to, for, or against? Okay. Now the public hearing is closed. It is back to us.
I'll start with,
Yes.
yeah, with what,
I'm
just
sorry.
one general comment I had when I was reviewing this application is, at first I was struck with how much relief was being asked for and how intense it seemed. But one thing I think that's really going for it is the proposed structure is really not very tall. It's one story, and relative to the topography of Jackson Hill, it really is just tucked back away there. And that, to me, is a huge factor, where looking at the site plan, it looks like the whole, it looks like a big amount of coverage, and again, that's part of the relief being asked for, but to me, it would have a much different feel if it was like a 30-foot tall building as opposed to this one-story, tastefully designed building.
Okay, thank you. Discussion? Well,
That sound like a motion?
Is that a motion?
I guess I'd be interested in some other
Hearing what other
feedback.
people say.
Yeah.
And, yes, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Ram. I will-
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's some questions about the conditional use permit process that the planning board will go through. I do think overall, it really comes down to a question of the attached garage. I mean, I do think essentially the proposed accessory dwelling unit meets what we're looking for per the ordinance in terms of overall size. I think the ordinance actually has a couple of little goof-ups in it where it says, your footprint can't be more than 750 square feet, your gross living area can't be more than 750. As we've already pointed out, there's probably going to be a disconnect there because your footprint is inevitably larger than your actual living area. So I think the ordinance itself probably needs a little bit of work, but within that, I mean, it's still fundamentally the same number. They're not asking for something outrageous. It really comes down to the question of the garage being added on. And most, really, of all the relief that's being asked for here is setback relief. The building coverage, yes, is above 25%, but it is an improvement upon what is currently there, which is 45.3% according to the staff report. We're down by about 8% or so from that number. So what the applicant is asking for is going to have less overall coverage by the time that that were done. Still doesn't fully meet the open space requirements, still doesn't fully meet the building coverage requirements, but is an improvement over the current situation. So I do think one of the unique aspects to this lot is that if you look at it, it was, especially if you bring it up on Map Geo, it was pretty clearly cut out of the adjacent lot that also has a structure on it that is pushed all the way to the, as you're standing on the lot, the right side of the lot. And it was like specifically cut out like right around the existing structure, and that's why the existing structure has almost no setbacks associated with it. So I do think that, that creates a particularly small lot, so that is going to burden the applicant's ability to make full use of it, at least in the sense of, what is already there. And then I do think some of the setbacks are really being driven by that. The garage, again, being asked for, does create a setback relief, but it is up against the Jackson Hill Street, which is really a paper street. If you're standing at this property, it looks like a driveway. Everyone would think it's a driveway. It doesn't really get you to Jackson Hill. You can kind of, I think there's like maybe a little dirt path that gets you there, but it's really not truly a street. Yeah, I do think it does, it is in the applicant's favor that side of the property doesn't have, it's open space. The applicant, the next property over is, has a distance to it of the width of that street, paper street. And so it's not going to be built upon or anything along those lines. So I do think that helps the applicant in terms of that setback relief that they need in terms of the garage. And then again, the total coverage of the project, yes, the garage does add to that. But overall, I think they are making a good faith effort on this very tiny, very sort of cookie cutter cutout lot to try and, make an improvement over what is there now.
Is that a motion?
You have somebody to your.
Oh, sorry, yes.
I would like to move that we approve the variance request as presented and advertised, if I get a second.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so our first criteria is section 10.233.21 and section 10.233.22. This is granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest. Granting the variance would observe the spirit of the ordinance. We often take these two criteria together in that they are about the spirit and intent of the ordinance. And as Mr. Rayum has discussed and explained, we're looking for setback relief, the front yard relief, the side yard relief, although there's been discussion that whether or not that's another front yard, the rear yard relief in the building coverage, and then open space coverage. And in all respects, this application is going in the right direction. It is making things more conforming, although they are not conforming. They are making things more conforming with the zoning ordinance. And therefore, I find that that part of the criteria has been met. Granting the variance would do substantial justice. And here, the board is tasked with the inquiry that, hold on one second, that any loss to the individual that is not outweighed by a gain to the general public is an injustice. I find that the public would not gain by any denial of the applicant of this variance. So therefore, this criteria, 10.233.23, granting the variance would do substantial justice. The next criteria is 10.233.24. Granting the variance would not diminish the values of surrounding properties. It would be a carriage house, one-story carriage house with a garage. It would be a significant improvement over the structure that is currently on the property, in which the HDC has deemed to be not of historic or architectural interest. Will definitely not diminish the value of surrounding properties. And then last, 10.233.25, little enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance will result in unnecessary hardship. The property has special conditions that distinguish it from other properties in the area, and owing to these special conditions, a fair and substantial relationship does not exist between the general public purposes of the ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision to the property, and the proposed use is a reasonable one. This property does have special conditions, as Mr. Rayum said. It is essentially been carved out of the lot that is to the stands. As you're looking at it, to the left of it, it is very constrained in what it can do in the back of the property, And also, it lies on a paper street, although actually I have to confess I drove that street. So I hope it's traversable by vehicles.
It's not a paper street.
So, or not a paper street, but it's some sort of public right-of-way, or however, I guess the city may want to.
Passageway.
The city may want to accept that street as a street. And owing to these special conditions, a fair and substantial relationship does not exist between the general public purpose of the ordinance provision and the specific application to that property. The side yard setbacks, the other relief that has been asked for in this case is not making much sense to apply those provisions to this property, given its uniqueness and also the fact that it is significantly smaller than the minimum lot size for the general residence A district. And also, proposed use is a reasonable one. Detached ADU is allowed in the general residence A district. And I think that's all that I have.
Does the second have anything to add?
Nope. Well, I'll take it back. I do have one small thing to add, which is yeah, I know it wasn't going to be possible. Let's face it. In terms of parking, I know the last time this application was before this board, there was a lot of concern about parking. I do think again the applicant has done a fair job here of trying to show how 3 legitimate parking spaces can be created. One is in the garage. The other 2 are between the current primary structure and this proposed new accessory dwelling unit. It looks far more feasible than what was proposed the first time around in terms of trying to prevent stacked parking and the need to back out onto Maplewood Avenue, which, especially if you saw the topography of the situation, you're basically backing down a hill into an area that has very, very little in the way of sight lines. Those are some of the concerns the board had the last time. I do think the applicant has adequately addressed this, and the fact that they've made the accessory dwelling units smaller has really been one of the contributing factors that allowed them to do that.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to add to my motion, I did not think that we needed a stipulation that this was dependent on a modification to the cup that is going to be considered by the planning board, because we do not need to do that because we've already granted the variance setback relief.
Mr. Nace.
I will not support the motion. I'm a little concerned at some of the information that is not in the document. We don't have a comparison of the gross floor area of the ADU to the building, the primary building, for example. We don't have the footprint of the ADU. And I note that the guidance on the cup and the planning board says the planning board may modify a specific standard set forth in the section on ADUs, except for the size and height of any ADU. So this is really more a technical issue here that I'm calling out, that it's a little unclear to me whether size includes things like the building footprint and whether a variance is needed for that or not, and the size of the building.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, I guess I would just add that both from in response to that, the planning department and having gone through the conditional use permit process, it was deemed that the size was referring to the living area that is set forth by state statute of the 750 square feet, as opposed to the building footprint size. But I've also learned that the planning board doesn't grant those modifications lately, so.
Okay, thank you. If there's no further discussion, then I will call the vote. Mr. Neese?
No.
Mr. Mannel?
Yes.
Ms. Margison?
Yes.
Mr. Rayam?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, so you are approved.
Thank you.
Okay. Our next item of business is new business. The request of John Gold Empire LLC owners and Benjamin Otis applicant for property located at 230 Lafayette Road, Unit 10, A/B, whereas relief is needed to establish a medical office in Units 10A and 10B, which requires the following. Variance from Section 10.440, use number 6.20, to allow a medical office where it is not allowed. Said property is located on Assessor Map 151, Lot 6-D10B, and lies within the Residence A GRA district. Is there anyone to speak to this?
Good evening. My name's Ben Otis. I'm applicant and also co-owner of the property. We're requesting, as you see, a variance to change our property at 230 Lafayette Road, Unit 8, Unit 10AB, from professional use to medical professional use. We initiated a building permit application for a tenant refit for a therapy and a medical clinic. The property, as you know, is zoned residential. We purchased the property from lawyers, so it was professional, June 24th, and plan to have the end use of this property be medical professional. The application, in addition to this letter, includes photos of the property and floor plan. There is no change to the exterior of the suite. There is no change to the load-bearing structures. This is within the Lafayette Professional Park condominiums. Our property is on the first floor of Building D. Building D has 10 other suites, all medical professionals as their current end use. The adjacent Building C has all medical professionals in that location as well. Allowing for medical professional use is consistent with the current use of this space. So my wife, and also co-owner of this property, has an established business as a child and family therapist in Portsmouth for over 15 plus years. Instead of renting, we will be looking to refit this space appropriately to continue to serve the people of the Seacoast. So I'll go into the 5 points on the variance. Public interest, allowing for medical professional use in a building and an adjacent building that is currently medical professional use supports the local community by maintaining a consistent expectation in the buildings. Adding a symbiotic service amongst medical professionals, this will support a balanced and vibrant neighborhood, promoting economic stability and fostering community spirit. 2, the spirit of the ordinance. This change respects the primary goals of the zoning ordinance by preserving the historical and business park character of this area, thus promoting a stable and family-friendly environment. 3, substantial justice. Approving the variance achieves a fair outcome for both the property owner and the community. There is no external change to the property. It will enhance the aesthetics and functional appeal within the suite, updating floors, ceiling, and lighting, adding an accessible bathroom for all, for an appropriate medical use. Currently, the bathroom is not accessible for any wheelchair or ADA compliance. Otherwise, that would impose some undue burden on the public that we would serve in that professional medical space. 4, property values. The proposed residential use will not diminish the value of surrounding properties. Exterior structures, again, will not be affected. It is likely to enhance the property values by updating the floors, walls, ceiling, and the accessible bathroom, contributing positively to the neighborhood's access, leading to a more modern medical professional layout. The 5th point to the variance, unnecessary hardship. The current zoning restrictions create an undue hardship by limiting the property's best use. The variance allows a reasonable and historically consistent use of the property, aligning with its characteristics and the neighborhood overall character. The consistent use of this property, again, is medical professional use. So we believe this variance request meets all the necessary criteria and respectfully ask for your approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions? Thank you. Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak in favor of this petition? Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition? Anyone to speak to, for, or against? Okay. The public hearing is closed.
No, go ahead.
I was pointing
I'd
to
like to
you.
make a motion to approve the application as presented. and
Is there a
advertised.
second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you.
No shortage of second
Whoa, that's
possibilities.
Wow. This is a popular.
I think you may have a winner.
This is a popular application. So taking the first two criteria of the variance not being contrary to the public interest and the spirit of the ordinance observed, I'm going to just take those together and focus on the public interest. And the public interest, this is basically the same use that is prevalent on this property, and there is no public interest to be served by limiting the use of this particular suite to be in conformance really with the ordinance. So I would say that it satisfies that criterion. Substantial justice being done. The benefits of the applicant is they have a place to perform their medical practice that is, again, consistent with the type of activity that's in the surrounding suites. This poses no harm to the public and no loss to the public whatsoever. One could say that it is actually a benefit to the public as well, so it's kind of a win-win situation, presenting substantial justice as a well-satisfied criterion. Values of the surrounding properties are not diminished. Again, it comes to the type of use. There is no excessive noise or changes, modifications to the exterior of the building or encroaching on other people's, other neighboring suites' ability to perform their businesses, and therefore the surrounding properties, the values of those will be completely unaffected by granting this variance. And then finally, literal enforcement of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship. Looking at special conditions of the property that distinguish it from other properties in the area, and particularly subsection A of that, which is there is no fair and substantial relationship between the general public purposes of the ordinance and the specific application of that provision to the property, and the proposed use is a reasonable one. Again, this all ties back to the prevailing use in the neighboring suites. Continuing those types of usages here in these suites is reasonable, and there is no because of the predominant use of, you know, there's a number of buildings on this property, and it does kind of define its own neighborhood. So there is no real relationship between the ordinance as it's written and the uses that are being commonly practiced in this neighborhood. And that's it. That's my motion.
Okay, does the second have anything to add?
Yeah, I would just say that normally this board is somewhat reluctant to grant variances for uses, but in this particular case, I do agree there's some kind of unique situations. Actually, I never realized this is two separate pieces of property. There's two lots involved with this condominium sort of complex. And oddly enough, they're in different zones, and neither zone actually allows office uses. And in fact, the previous use of a professional office was also not allowed by the GRA zone that this particular parcel goes into. So I do think, you know, this is a very unique set of circumstances where this goes back multiple decades, was built in there. I can understand why, from a zoning standpoint, the planning board would probably have a hard time zoning this more correctly. Certainly G1 would be an option. There is some G1 that's further south onto Lafayette, but really doesn't naturally extend up into this area. Just sort of creating these two plots as its own unique zone would kind of constitute spot zoning, which is also something that we don't want to go and do. But I do think there is a recognition here that there's been a long-standing use that while it is different from what is generally allowed in these residential neighborhoods, has worked quite seamlessly with them for many, many years now, and there's no reason to believe that the real intent of the ordinance is to somehow change these two parcels into a future residential area. I think they coexist well with the other residences, and so therefore this specific use request, while unusual for us to grant as a variance, I think makes sense, and for the reasons that the maker of the motion stated.
Thank you. Mr. Neese.
I support the motion. My eyes glaze over at all the letters we get from attorneys that refer to Chester Rod and Gun Club versus Town of Chester, but this is a textbook example of that, where the actual use in the area that has evolved over time has nothing to do with the zoning, and we would be hard-pressed to deny this in that case. even though this area was assigned as a residential area back in the 50s, I don't know what happened in between, but it's clearly not residential now, and this type of activity is rampant in that block.
I mean, there have
out of
been medical
control.
offices there since I moved here in the 80s. I mean, it's always been, that was an aside.
Dr.
Okay.
Yankum's there.
Excuse me?
Dr. Yankum.
I'm not going to ask about that. So,
Dr.
are we-
Luddington, he
are we
pulls
ready
teeth.
to- Oh, okay. Are we ready to vote?
He's pulled the tooth of mine, so yes.
Okay, good.
Let's call the question.
I'm going to call the question. Okay, so a yes vote allows a medical office. Mr. Neese?
Yes.
Mr. Mannell?
Yes.
Ms. Margison?
Yes.
Mr. Graham?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, so you're all set? Okay.
Thank you.
Didn't know the whole game was here.
Oh, yeah, I know them.
Oh. Okay, item B under new business. The request of Condos at Rock Hill owners and Stuart Bradley applicant for property located at 962 Islington Street and 964 Islington Street, whereas relief is needed to demolish and reconstruct the existing front steps, which requires the following relief. 1, variance from section 10.521 for A, an 11-foot front yard where 30 is required, and B, 30% building coverage where 20 is allowed, and 2, variance from section 10.321 to allow a nonconforming building or structure to be extended, reconstructed, or enlarged without conforming to the requirements of the ordinance. Said property is located on Assessor Map 171, Lot 1, and lies within the Single Residence B District. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Stuart Bradley. I'm a owner and resident of one of the condos condos at Rock Hill. I live in 966 Islington Street, which any of you who are long-term residents may recognize as Cliff's Shoes. So, we are requesting to remove some existing stairs at either end of a porch. One end 962 Islington Street, the other 964, and replace them with new stairs. The old stairs are out of code, somewhat dangerous, and really require replacement with new stairs. The first ordinance, 102233.21, variance will not be contrary to the public interest. The removal of these existing stairs to be replaced with stairs that meet current building codes will not have any impact on the public interest. The appearance of the new stairs will be indistinguishable from the old stairs as viewed from the street by any casual observer. 10.233.22, the spirit of the ordinance, we intend to follow both the letter and the spirit of the ordinance. 10.233.23, substantial justice will be done. The interest of the owners and the residents of the condos in Rock Hill will be served by providing safe and easier to climb stairs to enter the dwellings at 962 and 964 Islington. The interest of the general public will not be affected by the replacement of the existing stairs, unless, of course, they have business at either address and actually use the stairs. The existing stairs have risers with heights that vary between 6.5 and 8 inches per step. The treads on the current steps are about 10 inches wide and slightly angled down away from the risers. They are uncomfortable to climb and considerably below building code requirements. Substantial justice would be served by allowing us to replace these steps with new stairs that will have pressure-treated stringers consisting of 6 5/8 inch risers and 12-inch treads. They will be made of composite decking. There will not be any modifications to the porch. The public will be unimpacted by both visually and physically. 10.233.24, the values of the surrounding properties will not be diminished. The values of the surrounding properties will not be affected in any way. 10.233.25, literal enforcement of the provisions. Enforcement of the setback rules disallowing the condo association to replace these existing stairs could result in injury to someone trying to navigate these steps. The ages of the occupants of these two units are between 78 and 5 years old. Anyone using these steps, regardless of their age, finds them uncomfortable to climb and somewhat dangerous. An unnecessary hardship would continue if we were not allowed to replace the existing unsafe steps with new code-conforming stairs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any questions for the applicant? Thank you. I'm going to ask the,
I would like to just say that it was my first time going through a building permit process. And although there was a lot of work involved, I had a lot of questions. And everybody in the planning department, they were wonderful. They took their time. They explained things to me over again and over again until I understood. So they were very
well,
helpful.
thank you for taking the time to say that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is there anyone in the public who would like to speak in favor of this petition?
We're not the public.
Is there anyone, I'm looking for a face. Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition? Anyone who would speak to, for, or against? Public hearing is closed. And I might add, good job, planning department.
Take a bow, Steph.
Although we don't
Not
want you to
just
get
me,
too big of a
it's
head.
everybody in the planning
Well,
department
thank you,
has a
thank you.
part. so.
Send all gift
An
cards to
acceptance
Stephanie.
What would we like to do?
I'll make a motion to approve the
there a
application as
second?
presented and advertised.
Oh, sure, now nobody wants to
I'll
say
second.
Thank you.
Okay. So the essence of this application, this is one of those cases where I wish we had an expedited process that would,
Yes.
perhaps we can discuss some of those things next week. But anyway, putting that aside, this is a very straightforward application where two staircases are being replaced almost identically with replacement staircases. And because of that, taking the first two criteria together of the variance not being contrary to the public interest and the spirit of the ordinance being observed, there's no alteration whatsoever in the essential character of the neighborhood. In fact, this will be a change that is basically invisible to the rest of the neighborhood unless you happen to be going up and down those stairs. So it is consistent with that essential character. It certainly does not impact the safety or welfare or otherwise injure public rights, and therefore those two criteria are satisfied. Substantial justice is done. There is a benefit to the property owners in improving the safety of ingress and egress from the units on those staircases. There is no loss to the public in providing that safety benefit to the property owners, and therefore this substantial justice criterion is also satisfied. The values of the surrounding properties are not diminished, again, owing to the same reasons that were utilized in the first two criteria. This change is invisible to the surrounding property owners and will therefore have no conceivable impact on the value of their properties, and this criterion is satisfied. Literal enforcement of the ordinance would result in unnecessary hardship being due to special conditions of the property that distinguish it from other properties in the area. That's actually a little bit hard to articulate in this case. Let's say that the special condition of the property is the unsafe condition of ingress and egress to the dwelling, and that is not a condition that's shared by surrounding properties, and it therefore satisfies the criterion of not having any substantial relationship between the requirements of the ordinance and the proposed variance here. So I would say that all five criteria have been adequately satisfied.
Okay, thank you. Does the second have anything to add?
I mean, I guess for the for the hardship, just the existing structure is where it is, and the size of the lot and location on the lot is the reason for this variance. And yeah.
Any discussion? Okay, then, yes, I'm sorry.
I will be supporting the motion. I do think one of the other factors that weighs for the hardship is the building structure goes back to 1900, predates our ordinance. It really always had a front entryway. To somehow now say that the applicant can no longer use that front entryway effectively does not make sense. So.
Okay, thank you.
Good point.
Okay, if there's nothing else, then we will vote. Mr. Neese?
Yes.
Mr. Mannel?
Yes.
Ms. Marchison?
Yes.
Mr. Bayham?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you. And our next item of business, item C, the request of Ryan and Joanna Brandt, owners for property located at 570 Dennett Street, whereas relief is needed to demolish the existing single-car detached garage and construct a new single-car garage, which requires the following. 1, variance from section 10.571 to allow an accessory structure to be located in the required front yard and closer to the street than the principal building. 2, variance from section 10.573 to allow a 3-foot secondary front yard where 14 feet are required. And 3, variance from section 10.321 to allow a non-conforming building or structure to be extended, reconstructed, structured, or enlarged without conforming to the requirements of the ordinance. Said property is located on Assessor Map 161, Lot 12, and lies within the General Residence A District. Welcome.
Thanks. It's not often that at age 46 you do something new, so this is new for me. So thanks for hearing me. My name is Ryan Brandt. I live at 570 Dennett Street. I'm the applicant and owner. My wife and I purchased this home in 2015. The existing garage was there when we purchased it. It's about unknown age. The house is dating back to 1910. What we would like to do is take this building that is essentially unrepairable and kind of rotting and replace it on the same footprint, replace the concrete pad that it would be on with the modest expansion of 2 feet widthwise to the rear setback and 4 feet deeper into my property to accommodate a kind of modern car. It's a single car garage, detached, but the primary, secondary front yard setback of 3 feet will be maintained. We're not moving that in any way. It's a corner lot. We live on the corner of Dennett Street and Whipple Street. This is a garage that's on the secondary front along Whipple. I wanted to note that there's precedent along Whipple Street. Our abutting neighbors, the Briolats, they have a rather large 2-car garage that is along the same 3-foot setback along Whipple Street. And in addition, their non-conforming garage is almost directly on our rear property line. We're not looking to encroach on that the way that it is. In addition, I'll note that in our application, you'll see that I have letters of endorsement from all of the abutting neighbors, including the Briolats, but in total of 4. And lastly, I would note that, when my wife and I were evaluating what to do with this existing structure, we debated coming in front of you to look for a variance for a 2-car garage that would have been encroaching much more deeply on that rear setback, but decided, against doing so to kind of preserve, but to keep the existing non-conforming structure. So if I move into then the 5 criteria, if I look at the public interest, so this will not negatively impact the essential character of the neighborhood. It frankly will do the opposite by replacing this old rundown garage and replacing it with a new garage and design. Secondly, it reflects what is prevalent throughout the neighborhood, as one of my exhibits has demonstrated. And 3, the expansion by 2 feet on one dimension and 4 feet deeper into the lot will be very minorly noticeable in terms of size, placement, and lot coverage. For the second point around the spirit of the ordinance being observed, this is a non-conforming lot. If we were, our kind of width dimension is 61 feet. If we were to observe the setbacks of 15 feet from our secondary front, and I will note that I misstated in here that the second dimension here I gave was to the rear. I misspoke in that. It should have been 10 feet, not 20 feet. Either way, if we were to observe the setbacks, a garage would essentially be right in the middle of our lot, which is not really a viable option. And also, I would say that in considering the variance around the accessory building in front, it complies with that for, the primary front of Dennett Street. It's solely because we're on the corner lot that we need that variance, because again of the secondary front. And, to expect it to stay put and use as best it can is frankly inconsistent with the ordinance spirit of promoting safe and appropriate and user development for both us and future owners. In regards to the third criteria of, that it would do substantial justice, using the kind of balance between any gain that the public is greater than the loss suffered by myself and my wife. I don't believe that the public has any gain by retaining this existing rotting structure. And our loss of opportunity to frankly replace this provides more gain than the alternative. For the fourth criteria of the values of surrounding properties are not diminished, very similar sort of point being made here that if anything, the property values will increase by replacing this, really poor eyesore that is on our property with something that is a more modern construction. And to the fifth criteria of little enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance result in an unnecessary hardship. Again, our lot is a non-conforming lot. This is a non-conforming building on a non-conforming lot. The literal enforcement would require that placement right in the center of our property. We have a variety of hardscaping within the property that would make it, frankly, untenable to do. And, it would require major reinvestment, but frankly, it would not be a viable option to pursue. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? I want to say I think this was a very thorough application. I know you don't do this every day, and it's really good. You
Staff
did
the
a good
former
job showing
applicant.
us your neighborhood and going out to the neighbors, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I will now open it to the public. Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak to, for, or against this petition? Anyone in the public who would like to speak to this petition? Anyone in opposition? Okay. Public hearing is closed.
Madam Chair, I move to approve the request as presented and advertised.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mitz.
I'll just say I'm most impressed that all the photographs are black and white. Not sure how you did that. Got a very old world feel to it going on. Just really going to our criteria for the variance. And so the first two, grant the variance would not be contrary to the public interest. Grant the variance would observe the spirit of the ordinance. We take those two together to reflect what is being asked for in terms of the characteristics of the neighborhood. Is there anything that's being substantially altered here? I think the applicant has made a good argument that the existing alignment for the garage is consistent with the closest neighbor. It certainly has been in place for many, many years. Is not out of character with the neighborhood overall, with having these accessory structures that, while not all the examples they've provided are necessarily front yard, or in this case, a secondary side yard setback, they are, usually up against a property line or in some way non-conforming. So the fact that the applicants continue to ask to align the garage to this 3-foot depth relative to the property line is satisfactory. I'll also just say the fact that it's 4 feet deeper really isn't a purview of this board. The applicant can extend this into the property much deeper. It's really the width within that 15-foot side yard setback, which is sort of adding that 2 additional feet, is really what the board would be concerned about here. The actual depth is beyond where the setback area would be. So granting the variance would do substantial justice. Again, so that's our balancing test between the general public purposes of the ordinance and the specific application here, and what the benefits are for each of those groups. Again, the fact that the applicant can now create a garage that is 2 feet wider, that is, essentially more conforming to a modern single-car garage, and the applicant, as is pointed out, not asking for a 2-garage here, asking to continue this relatively modest 1-car garage, but just sort of bring it up to a width that is more accepted in modern times for allowing a reasonable variety of vehicles to be parked in it. Is really, there's nothing in the public purposes that would say, push them back to the 15-foot line is somehow going to provide some public benefit. It's really in alignment with the neighborhood overall, and as indicated, the applicant's neighbors are understand that and are supportive of it. Granted, the variance would not diminish the values of surrounding properties. Again, this is a very, very minor change. Overall, the improvement of garage is probably a net plus benefit. The fact that it's slightly larger and the cross dimension is not going to negatively affect that. And then the hardship criteria, what is unique about this lot that says that the applicant doesn't need to fully comply with the zoning ordinance. Again, this is there was a pre-existing structure that likely predates our current zoning requirements, has been there successfully as a characteristic really of the neighborhood overall. So with that, it is a unique sort of set of circumstances. The applicant is simply asking to replace that which is existing, not to cause further encroachment. They also have some additional distance to the actual roadway itself, which sort of gives the feel like this is not quite at 3 feet. It's not like right up against a road. There is some additional room in there that provides a feeling of being set back a little bit further from the road. So I think all those things are special conditions about this property, and the proposed use is reasonable. It's a single-car garage, not expanding the nature of that use in any substantial way. It's simply providing a more modern version of what already exists. So with that, I recommend approval.
Does the second have anything to add?
I'll just add that the secondary frontage is on Whipple Street, and Whipple Street is a very, very low traffic street, and the proposed location of this garage is sufficiently far from the intersection with Dennett that it wouldn't provide any sightline issues.
Okay. If there's no further discussion, we will vote. Mr. Neese?
Yes.
Mr. Mannel?
Yes.
Ms. Margison?
Yes.
Mr. Rayam?
Yes.
Mr. Rossi?
Yes.
Mr. Mattson?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so under other business, I want to remind everybody that the board will have a work session next Tuesday at 6. Next Tuesday at 6.
I showed up this Tuesday at 6.
Oh, no.
And on rules and regs, yes.
Just a question for yourself, Madam Chair, and the staff. I know that they asked for some topics a while ago. Unfortunately, I was not able to get any in. Is there any additional opportunity to provide some topics for consideration?
There's most likely going to be a second meeting that deals more specifically with the questions from the board.
Okay.
Yes.
And will we be having legal counsel?
We are having, oh my God, who's coming? I'm sorry. Attorney McCord. Attorney McCord is coming, yes.
Okay. So it is specific to the rules and
regs.
regs.
And then we are very likely to have another meeting with some of your more specific questions that may not be answered this evening, as there will be a time limit. Yes, Mr. Ross.
So if I have a rules and reg suggestion that I didn't submit previously because I wasn't smart enough to think of it, could I still bring it up?
I don't see why not, or has he been given a cheat sheet?
I mean, if you can email it to me, I can give it to Attorney McCourt just so he's prepared. If there's any additional research that needs to be done, otherwise, I don't think there's any reason to limit.
Is there a deadline for that? I mean, do you need them in the next 24 hours?
Let's say by Thursday afternoon.
Okay.
And I do want to say that I think we will find this very worthwhile, and given that, there's no reason why we can't touch base regularly, and so don't feel that your questions will remain.
Other than the 2 meetings a month that we already typically
I know. This was a lucky month that we happened to.
This was a very lucky
to
month.
do this. Yes, Mr. Janice.
So when you say rules and regulations, do you mean just our written rules for the board?
That is the goal for the first meeting, but I am sure that it will lead to many.
And we need to sort of propose specific questions based on these rules and regulations in order to have them answered by next Tuesday, correct?
Yes, and some of them have already, I think, been. Yes, yes.
We could propose specific changes to the rules and regulations then.
You certainly can propose them. We'll see what
Okay, very good. Thank you.
the legal response is to that, how one goes about it, and yes,
Fantastic, thanks.
Can I make one request?
please.
Just real quick, and I don't want to give you guys more homework, but if everybody could take a minute to, they're very short, to read through the rules and regs before the meeting, just so that we're familiar on, what Attorney McCourt's going to be touching on. He won't go through it, I believe, in detail, but he is going to do a quick presentation, and that would help move things along.
And for Mr. Rayum only,
Knowledge
that
of so
includes the
many other
entire
towns, So
RSA.
I think that this.
You can do any additional research that you want.
Yeah, I think he has pretty broad knowledge about this, so I think we're in good hands, and we're, anybody want to adjourn?
I would like to do that, yes. I'd make a motion to adjourn.
All right, we're adjourned.